said that, I had this divine infusion, or what they call a supernatural infusion of energy, of courage, and an idea. The idea dropped into my head like a coin falling through water, and it was to draw a fear pyramid, worst fear at the top, and confront them one by one. Boom. Hope. I felt hope. I don't have to be stuck here. I can do something about it.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back. Today, my guest might be the deadliest man on the planet. Seriously. Geoff Thompson went from breaking up fights as a bouncer in a bar to breaking and opening hearts and minds. He's lived what most of us have only talked about, and facing our fears and channeling that energy and using it as fuel for transformation. This man went from knocking people out to knocking people awake. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment. Without further ado, here is the great and powerful mystic, Geoff Thompson. So I recently picked up the Caretaker. I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, every morning I listen to a podcast that you've posted on YouTube. And it helps me get through my day. It helps me kind of realize the potential for myself. We have similar backgrounds, blue collar, I would consider, right? But there's a potential there. There's a way that I can see myself connecting with a higher power. And I'm interested in understanding more, like your story is so dynamic and diverse, and the depth of it is so powerful. You know, coming from a blue collar background, like when did you start realizing that there was an actual assimilation process with a higher power, with that God consciousness or that Christ consciousness or that God power energy? Like, when did you start realizing that was a possibility?
I think I felt it naturally, really early. And I was on a trajectory. I felt that anything was possible. I innately knew that even as a kid. And even as a young boy, I was like very into, discipline training. Even if it was just football, I was very disciplined. I could make myself repeat techniques over and over again until I'd perfected them. So I kind of had an idea that anything was possible. I believed in the mysterious. Then my trajectory was interrupted at the age of 11, as you know, when I was sexually abused by a teacher that I was working with. And that kind of possessed me of a lot of fear and a lot of mistrust, like a schemer or a parasite of extreme mistrust. So where my path was like, I'm going to trip the light fantastic, it was interrupted at the age of 11 or 12 by this guy. So before that, I was like the teacher's pet. I was an aspiring Aikidoist. or Aikidoka. I was going to really do things with Aikido. I was the one that was pointed out in class. I was the one that was lauded, and I was good at it. I don't mean that in a bragging sense. I just practiced a lot. I can remember my dad grabbing me once when he come back from the pub, just playing about, and I caught him in an arm bar and just pinned him to the floor, and he couldn't catch his breath. I was a kid. So it was there. And then this kind of night, there was a whole grooming process which was the most damaging. And then a night of betrayal. And then afterwards, like, I think something in me abandoned me, jumped ship, and I was left with this terror, not just a terror of what had happened, this kind of hand coming out of the night. I was abused in the middle of the night. And this absolute terror that I couldn't even quantify. Just that I couldn't cope with it, and I definitely couldn't tell anybody about it. I couldn't tell my mum and dad or anything like that, because we were brought up as Irish Catholics, so there was, my mum was more afraid of shame than she was of an assassin's bullet. So you did not bring shame to the door. That was our mantra. Do not bring shame to my door. So we were all terrified my mum was terrified of shame, and we were terrified of my mum withdrawing love. She was a matriarch. So we were all quietly terrified of her withdrawing love, because to us she was the source of love. I didn't see God as the source of love. I saw her as the source of love. So the idea of her abandoning me was it was like death. It was like the fear of death. It was like climbing out of a dugout and going across the no man's land with a bayonet. So this happened and it interrupted my journey. This guy left a parasite in me. I'm talking literally. You could call it a schema, an abandonment schema. You could call it a parasite. You could call it a demon. Whatever it was, a demon in the sense of either a creature or a divided thought or a divided psyche. Either way, from that age on, from the age of 11, every single decision I made from that time onwards was determined by and projected through a filter of not fear but terror. So it stopped me seeking teachers. It stopped me training in Aikido. Then later on, maybe a year and a half or 2 years later, I blurted it out one day when my dad was teasing me and telling me off. Oh, you couldn't stay with the Aikido. You couldn't stick with it. You could have been good. And I blurted out that the teacher abused me. And it was like I dropped a bomb in my mum's Sunday kitchen and they just were not prepared for it. As you said, they were blue collar or working class folk. They were not very highly educated. They were full of love, but they were terrified by middle-class professionals. My mum was particularly terrified of shame. So they didn't know how to cope with it. I was met with stark silence and later questioning. And the questioning was subtle, but the questioning basically said, did you lead him on? Did you lead him on? You didn't lead him on, did you? That was the implicit suggestion. I wrote a play about it in order to clean it. Excuse me. And in the play, the character says, what do you mean did I leave it? What do you mean did I lead him on? I was 11. I was fucking 11. I was 11. I don't even understand that. What does that mean? Lead him on. This was the maniacal internal monologue of me and my character. I didn't understand it. So I was abused, which I call the first abuse. And then I was abused a second time, which was the denial. And then later on, when I was an adult and I'd grown some muscles, I went to the police and reported it. This was like maybe 15, 20 years after the event, and the police dismissed it as well. They seemed more interested in whether I was aroused and whether I enjoyed it. And basically said, unless you catch these guys in the act, we're wasting our time. So that's a short history, but it was interrupted. So I knew it. But then it took me a lot of courage to eventually not only confront this parasite within me, because it took over my autonomy. It took over much of my autonomy. If I had fear before, it increased it tenfold. In fact, I don't really remember having fear before that event, but afterwards I had a lot of terror, a lot of fear. And that was both a curse and a blessing. It was a curse because it left me fractured. It left me with a living parasite. It left me not in control of my own autonomy. Please excuse me. Not in control of my own autonomy. And it, if I went towards this, to trip this light fantastic, to do these amazing things, this terror just appeared immediately and says, where do you think you're going? If I got to the periphery of an idea to expand, I felt terror. I felt like it was like an event horizon. If I go over this, I'm going to be sucked into the unknown. I'm going to be lost. So every time I had this aspiration to do something, I met with terror, depression. So it was a blessing. It was a hindrance because it stopped me from growing, but it became a blessing because when I eventually started to go inside and seek it out, it became a source of energy. Not only was I able to remove this parasite, I was also able to confront it and embrace it and absorb 99% of its negativity until it gave up its light. It had an animating light within it, had a neon, and it came over and it joined into the mass of my soul, or the mass of my will force. So this happened when I was in my early 20s, suffering with periodic depression. Massive amounts of creative energy wants to come out, but no behavioral expression, because every time it came out, I became afraid, and I became, I'd have this voice there, well, who are you to be a writer? You can't write. You're just a piece of shit. You're not you. Who are you to write? What are you going to write? What are you going to write about? So this was part of my upbringing, but also part of the schema, which is, listen, if this guy you idolized can abuse you, you're not worth anything. And if your mum and dad can deny you, you're not worth anything. And if the police can, kick you into touch, you're not worth anything. Even God abandoned you. This was the argument going on in my head. Then I had this one moment where I thought, I was deeply depressed. My life was a living misery. And I just had this moment when I just said, I can't live like this anymore. I refuse to live like this anymore. I've got a wife, I've got kids, I've got responsibilities, I've got things to do. I refuse to live like this anymore. The moment I said that, I had this divine infusion, or what they call a supernatural infusion of energy, of courage, and an idea. The idea dropped into my head like a coin falling through water, and it was to draw a fear pyramid, write down all of my fears on the pyramid, least fear at the bottom, worst fear at the top, and confront them one by one. Boom. Hope. I felt hope. So I just thought, I don't have to be stuck here. I can do something about this. If I take it 2 steps back as well, when I was depressed, I'd go to the bookshop and I'd pick up a book, and it would promise to tell me the secret to overcoming fear. It promised. On the blurb, I'd get it home, and the magazines, I'd get them home, and I'd get a cup of tea, and I'm going to get the answers, and I'd read it, and they lied. They lied. Or they didn't tell the truth, which amounts to the same thing. Or they didn't know. But either way, they didn't give me an answer. I realized later that was because I was being called to find my own answers, get my own proof, from my own experiences, not rely on anybody else. So when I read this last book I read that promised to give me the answers, I remember being so disappointed and so angry. And I remember saying to myself, when I find the answers, I'm going to tell everybody. Now, I've told this story a million times, but I need to keep repeating it. If I've told it a million times, Trey, I haven't told it enough. It needs to be repeated again and again for people listening, and also for me to rehear it. So I said, I'm going to share it with everybody. Now, I was quite young at the time, and I didn't realize that I'd actually fallen on the secret to the Holy Grail. I'd fallen on the Philosopher's Stone. And that is, as they say in the Kabbalah, the master sets the table for the servant before he eats himself. In other words, if you want abundance, if you want knowledge, if you want information to inform you and reform you and transform you, no problem, call it down for somebody else. If you create a covenant to draw down energy and promise to receive it and conserve it and train it like a conveyancer, like an escrow account, and then give it away, you can have as much as you like. It's infinite, because that will help the universe to evolve towards its omega point, and it will help you to evolve towards the same omega point. So I triggered on the key. That is the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is, in Kabbalah they say that if we receive, receive in order just to serve the self, it's considered to be evil, the personification of evil. In other words, it's a privation. It's not whole. It isn't a whole concept. It isn't a unity. There's no order there. But if you receive in order to share, you automatically fall into the kind flow of the Tao, and it will serve you. You have no choice but to serve you, because it has a, do they call it it has an attractive force that attracts us all towards our own evolution, towards wholeness. So I was able to recognize that much later, but that was the vow. So when I finally did write about it, I did exactly that. I told everybody. That was like, I don't know, 30 or 40 years ago. So I realized that when I received this information, as long as I was prepared to receive it and conserve it and train it and deliver it out, as Rumi says, the water wheel receives the water and turns and gives it all away weeping. That's how it stays in the garden. That's what he's telling us cryptically, that we have to receive it and we have to honor it, and we can't plunder it. We can't have any elements in us that are, still rebellious, or any parts of us that are still greedy, because if any of it is plundered, boom, the covenant is broken straight away. This is told to us in the Exodus story, in the 5 books of Moses. It's told to us in the Bhagavad Gita. It's told to us in Revelations. It's told to us in the Guru Granth Sahib, the Sikh Bible. It's told us in the Dhammapada. It's there. It's everywhere. It's there for anybody to see. So it was only when I did the fear pyramid and started to confront my fears one at a time that I got back on track and recognized this was the secret, and this was why what happened to me was a blessing, because I was left with a reservoir of rage, a reservoir of anger, a reservoir of confusion, cognitive dissonance, disappointment, shame, fathom deep shame. Man, what are all those things made of? Atoms. What are atoms? It's just energy. Just was energy in the wrong shape. And I was able to call on that, bring it into the machine of truth, which was my fear pyramid, and convert it to light. I had to stand in front of it. As O Sensei says, I had to absorb 99% of its threat, its aggression, its fear. And then at that certain point when it got so close, it flipped over the event horizon within me, and it was dragged into my own nucleus. So as that volume of fear decreased and converted, the mass of my soul increased and got denser and was able to attract more and more potential. So I didn't realize that this simple idea, 30 or 40 years later, I'm recognizing that this simple idea of drawing a fear pyramid was physics. Basically, I was creating a nucleus within myself, and I was creating a nucleus within myself, and I was dragging in all of the electrons that clouded around me, all those negative particles, all those negative elements, all those negative experiences, including that of the abuser, including all the energy from the parasite in me, and I was converting it into light. So I was literally ripping away its negative shell, and the light that was in it, the aeon or the phase of God, was jumped free, and it bound itself to me. So in other words, I was taking energy from darkness. I was converting evil into good, or I was making privation, something that lacked wholeness, into something whole, and that wholeness was in me. And then, of course, I realized that all of my negative karma, of which I had a lot, all of that contained light that I needed to convert. All of my negative beliefs, false beliefs. In fact, the false ego himself contained an aeon of light that needed to be converted. So my job then became one of what they would call apophatic theology. I didn't know what God was, but I knew what he wasn't. I absolutely knew what he wasn't. So all the parts of me that I didn't recognize as good, I started to convert one at a time, one step at a time. So I know we were talking about the theme of this podcast as being about how do we surrender to God? Well, we surrender one sacrifice at a time, one vice at a time. So everything in my life that had vice, I went to my nucleus, I spoke to it, I communicated with it, I created like an isthmus or a sine curve. I went into that place between heaven and earth where the saints reside, and I said, where can I work? How can I improve? And they said, well, you've still got a pornography addiction, and we're not worried about the pornography, we're worried about what you're feeding with that. So there was still a parasite that was feeding on pornography. You're still overeating. So we're not really worried about what you're eating. We're worried about what you're feeding, because there's a parasite in you that you're feeding. You're still taking drugs. I'm drinking alcohol, not drugs so much, but it's still a drug. And it's abusive to your system. And then later on, you're eating meat. You're killing animals. You're interrupting their karmic journey in order to sate something in you. So gradually, bit by bit, I was brought to contract my ego and all of the negatives and expand my nucleus or my mass. So I was able to surrender to God, or sacrifice myself to God, or to what the Kabbalists would call the Ein Sof, the infinite one, the endless one, the universe, just one step at a time. But as Gurdjieff said, that is the work. It isn't just about sitting in meditation and saying Om. I only go into meditation for direction and instruction, because I go into meditation, I can speak to my soul, who is my teacher, and he will say, this is where you need to work. Why aren't you looking at this? You're still afraid of this. You're still addicted to this. You're still grasping onto this. You're still grasping for that. So it would show me one thing at a time. And then each time that became my, what the prophet would call the greater jihad, the inner battle, the inner war. So the urge for pornography would rise up, sexual pornography, violent pornography, food pornography, gossip pornography, anything that was in excess, it would rise up. And then the war would be for me to look at it and observe it with choiceless awareness. In other words, to sit in my nucleus and not engage it, not identify with it. And when I did that, it would cross the event horizon and the negativity would be cast away. And the light that was within it would come into my central nucleus, into the mass of who I am. So I became interested in mass, not volume. Not interested in volume. And if you want to know what that mass and volume looks like, imagine a beach ball, imagine a bowling ball. Both the same volume, but there's a big difference in mass. If I dropped a bowling ball on your foot, you'd know. But a beach ball, you just kick it away. So we're interested in mass. Mass is attractive, it's solid, it's stable, it's ordered, and it draws towards it everything it needs in order to reach its own omega point. So the fear pyramid became an exercise in physics. I was converting electrons into a nucleus. That's what I was doing. I was frame dragging them in, and I think in physics they call it electron capture. So I was basically capturing the light that was contained in anything in my life that was dark. So all of those things weren't a hindrance, and they weren't things that I needed to get rid of. They were things I needed to draw in and convert. A bit like a light bulb. You've got a positive terminal, a negative terminal, and then you've got a filament that sits between the two and creates a bridge. The three forces create the fourth force of light. So I've got a positive inclination, a negative inclination, and I've got a neutral will force that I'm able to put between the two to create a bridge or a sine curve or an isthmus. And from that, I create light. So there's no longer three separate, disparate forces. There is just light. So that was the process I was working through on the fear pyramid. It was the process of converting darkness into light. That's why I always say to people, if you've got a lot of trauma in your life, if you've got a lot of depression, if you've got a lot of fear, if you've got a lot of anxiety, behind all of that is energy. It's all made of atoms. Even just an idea, a thought is made of atoms. And if it's a negative thought, it's just something that's in an unwhole or an evil shape. And if we have the courage to sit still and observe it, we can convert that into light or into love, whatever you want to call it. This is why I love the Rumi quote when he says, love is not a subtle argument, the door there is devastation. He's basically saying in order to access love, we have to devastate everything in our life that is not love. And that's how they describe an electron being converted into the nucleus of an atom. The shell, the negative shell of the electron, is devastated. It's literally cast away. And the effulgence that's in the electron suddenly is floating free, and it binds itself to the nearest stable nucleus, which is us. Now, if you take that back to the Bhagavad Gita, or the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the Hindu text, this is like 5,000 years old, and it's talking about the birth of Krishna, or you could say the birth of consciousness, and it tells the story of King Kamsa. King Kamsa hears that this child has been born that he's going to challenge for his sovereignty. So King Kamsa represents the negative ego. So he sends demons towards Krishna when he's a child. Let's kill him while he's a child. And Krishna takes on and wrestles with every one of the demons, kills it. The negative aspect of the demon is liberated, and the effulgence that's in the demon comes across and merges with Krishna, until eventually he goes and literally wrestles with King Kamsa himself. So 5,000 years ago, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita is the fruits of the Bhagavatam. We've got the story of physics 5,000 years ago. Even if you go back to the big 4,000 years ago with the Old Testament, when Solomon is talking to God, God says to him, "Build me a temple." He said, "I'm residing temporarily in dark cloud." He said, "Build me a temple and I'll reside permanently with you." So when you look at an electron or an atom again, physicists call the orbiting electrons clouds, dark clouds of electrons. And the nucleus is the temple. So the Old Testament is talking about physics. It only matters in that it corroborates what I'm talking about, that when I found the courage and made a covenant to pass on what I'd learned, I was given a precedent from particle physics in order to convert evil into light, not to get rid of it, not to eschew it, not to pretend it's not there, not to deny it, not to project it, not to put blame on anybody else, but just to go, wow, I'm surrounded by a massive energy that I call depression. I've got a massive energy that I call fear. I have a massive energy that I call shame. And my way of converting that was literally to write it down. So I took the chaos of all that and I wrote it down and put it into order. Let me just show you. This was my first attempt at converting negativity into light, taking disorder and putting it into order. So if you look at that, it is a beautifully bound, ordered book. Now, before I got this information, it was a chaos of violent energy running around my body. Everything from violence to sexual pornography, to confusion, to denial, everything. Every vice you can think of was in my body, roaming around and attacking me all the time. It was blackmailing, and it was violent, and it was abusive. When I brought it to order and put it into this book, all of that chaos went. I do not have that chaos in my body. It's not in my body. I don't harbor those things anymore. I converted them into light, put them into the book. That was my final part of the covenant, so that I could share them with other people. So that was the first book I did. It's one of many. Let me show you another thing. Another tremendous chaos in my life was when my brother died at the age of 42 from alcoholism. And the family imploded around the bed. Everything came out: shame, embarrassment, fear, denial, projection, particularly shame. my mum and dad didn't want anybody to know that my brother had died from alcoholism. Even though they were beautiful parents, they were very loving, they were terrified of shame. We don't want our dirty washing done in public. It isn't dirty washing, it's my brother. And it's not he's not an alcoholic. This is the disease he's got. He is at a point where he's got no choice. So there's lots of, we're nearly literally fighting around the bed because there was so much confusion and particularly cognitive dissonance. So in order to understand my own shame and my own confusion, I wrote a film about it called Brown Paper Bag. So I've got all this chaos, which is imploding around the family. At one point, I had my dad by the lapels because he came to the hospital drunk when my brother was dying from alcoholism because I didn't understand it. I was so angry. So I thought, I'm going to write a film about it and I'm going to go directly to the truth. I'm going to put this chaos into the machine of truth and I'm going to order it. And I wrote a film called Brown Paper Bag. So I basically looked at all of those negative particles around me. I brought them into the nucleus and converted them. And when I finished the film, believe me, I had no chaos about that situation. All I felt for my mum and dad and for my brother was love, love, love. I felt it. It was ordered. Now, I wrote that film and it won a BAFTA award. So the BAFTA award, you could say, is the physical manifestation of all of that chaos brought into order. That is. But if you feel the weight of it, it's very weighty. But I used to carry that. See, that's ordered and it's beautiful and it's a mask and it's, it's lots of things. It's a key. This gets me into prisons to talk to prisoners. This gets me into schools to talk to kids. Geoff Thompson is going to come and talk to the kids. Who's Geoff Thompson? Oh, he won a BAFTA. Bring him in. So that's a key. That lets me into places. That got me into some of the roughest, most impregnable prisons in Britain to talk to the prisoners. That got me through every single door. Got me in, got me out. One of the guards said to me, this is the most difficult prison to get into and get out of in Britain. This key, this truth, this chaos formed into order, got me into those prisons and enabled me to sit in front of lifers. This is a Cat A prison, so they're all in for life, and talk to them about the power of perception and how we can change perception to change reality. And they understood it. Now have a look at what's on the back. Can you see it?
Yeah.
The atom. The nucleus in the center, where are we? The nucleus there, and all of the negative particles around it. So we bring those negative particles, the depressions, the fears, into the nucleus of the self, and we convert them into light. And that's what it looks like. And of course, when we hit the nucleus, the third eye opens. That's what happens. That's what you would call the isthmus, or the filament or the firmament between heaven and earth. So we go into that place. That's where we go in meditation. So they're very practical ways of taking volume. If you imagine me as a bouncer, lots of volume, lots of noise, lots of violence, lots of chaos, surrounded by more chaos. And that's me bringing it into mass. So I've took all of those experiences and put them into something that has mass, something that has attraction. So this was so attractive that it's traveled all around the world. It got me invited to Las Vegas to teach for Chuck Norris because he recognized truth. Truth has a mass. It might be invisible, but it has a mass and it is an attractive force. He hired me to go over there for 10 days to teach his top students. So that's truth is mass. So, but the covenant, as I said at the beginning, is that we pass it on to other people. If we don't pass it on, the covenant is broken. And we no longer become a good receptacle for the evolving universe. The universe wants to increase in complexity and order, and it needs machines to help it do that. So if we are a willing machine, if we go, yeah, I want to do that. If you let me have this information, if you inform me and reform me and transform me, I'll pass that on to everybody. I'll tell everybody. They go, okay, we'll give you this knowledge. Go and do a TED talk. Go and stand and tell your story in a TED talk. Do 90 hours of practice to get it down, and go and stand with all of that fear running around you, with all that, more fear for my TED talk than I did on the door. And it will say, go on London Real, go on Sky News, go on live television. These people want to hear this story. That's your covenant. You've promised you will tell this story where we guide you to tell it. We want you to tell it. So it's not just a matter of receiving it and then going, I've got that, masturbating on it. Oh, this is nice. I know this stuff. If we don't move it on, it becomes pestilent. And the energy that we've brought in starts to disease, and it attracts beast and foul. And then, of course, it breaks the covenant. That's the whole story of the Old Testament, the 5 books of Moses. The whole story is about the creation and breaking of covenants until eventually the forebears of Moses keep the covenant and are able to get into the promised land. But even then, even in the promised land, there's still work to be done. There are still enemies to be booted out. In other words, there's still other energies still to be converted. So in a very long-winded way, that's what I see. This is where I am, constantly contracting in order to expand, constantly expanding in consciousness in order to contract. So I'm interested in mass, which you could call love or truth or God or prana or the attractive forces or the permanent materials. The reason people get confused with it all is because there are so many different names for the same thing. But ultimately, we feel it. If you want to experience it, it's not difficult. We're experiencing it now. Me and you have come together on this in order to exchange love, knowledge, in order to move knowledge, which is the actuation of love. So we've created a liminal space where we are able to experience God in the exchange. We can experience God in the exchange. If you stop and give a rough sleeper a coin for a cup of tea or buy him some food, and you actually engage with him, you will feel God in that exchange. You'll feel eternity in that exchange. And you can't feel that and not be changed by it. So those opportunities to feel God are there every day. The opportunity to feel Satan is there every day as well. Every time we engage a negative thought, he is there. Believe me, he's resident. Every time we say unkind things about somebody, the devil is speaking through us. We're putting an ill angel into the world, and it has the same properties that it's able to spread like a virus. Every time we do something negative, every time we betray our own morals or ethics, the devil is present. It's a choice. So the idea is that we don't have a negative and a positive and a neutral. Same as an atom again. An atom has a negative particle, it has a positive particle, and it has a neutral particle. And that's how it creates a mass in the center of an atom. And obviously the atom is the beginning of, all of creation. So the idea is that we recognize that negativity is there, and we use our powerful will force, which is said to be the most powerful force in the universe, our own will force, because it's a working arm of the soul. We use our will force to create this vessel or this triangle, this triumvirate or this trinity, and we create light. So I haven't got a negative or a positive or a neutral, I've just got light. So every time I stop and serve somebody selflessly, from a place of love, from a place of compassion, I'm creating that triangle, and I'm experiencing love, and I'm experiencing God. And that goes out as a force. I feel it. The recipient feels it. Anybody that witnesses it feels it. And it goes out as an egentropic force, an ever-increasing force, something that goes out and accumulates compound interest. It cannot fail to make profit if we work from love. But I'll come back to what I said before. Love is not a subtle argument. the door there is devastation. So you, me, anybody listening, if you want to access love, that's a choice. That's your free will. But you have to devastate the parts of your life that are not love. And if you're not quite sure what they are, you can ask people around you to point out where your faults are. Or you can go into meditation and talk to your soul and say, where are my faults? Where can I work? I used to ask everybody I spoke to. Everybody. I spoke to Uri Geller on the phone once, the mystic. Said, how can I improve? He said, expand. You need to expand, Geoff. In other words, expand consciousness. I spoke to Gandhi in a meditation. I said to Gandhi, how can I develop Mr. Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi? And he said, Geoff, you need to make yourself small. So I need to contract ego and expand consciousness. So both of them said opposite things. Both of them said the same thing. So if we want to experience love, we've got to not deny the negative. We need the negative, not deny the devil. We need all that energy. We need it to convert. We need all three energies, but we need to have something in the very center of us that takes charge of those energies. So in realistic terms, I want to get off drugs, but I kind of like drugs. When we take our will force and put it between those two forces and create a third force, we're able to come off drugs or come off overeating or whatever it is. We're able to get rid of our addiction by converting it into light. So we have to bring all three forces together. So it's not about getting rid of that. It's about recognizing it as a power, as an energy, as a force, and bringing it together with the light. So positive, negative, and neutral creates light, creates love, creates these attractive forces.
It's beautiful. Like I can listen to you for
sense?
every day. Yeah, 100%. So there's a lot there, and I really want to like hone in on the process. Like when you start bringing in this intelligence, this divine intelligence, this love, adding more mass than volume, like what are the markers for that? Is it more like presence of love in your life? How does your reality reflect this new energy that is coming through you, right? Because I feel like a lot of people, myself included, we get distracted by everyday life. And being from the blue collar class, there are distractions like financials. There are, I mean, just making ends meet, all the family dynamics, all the things that are going on in politics, geopolitical narratives, and I mean all the things, right? Not saying that anyone else has different issues, but like being from blue collar, that's how I experience reality. So like when you're starting to bring in this energy, this love, right? Like what are the markers in your reality? What starts to change? Like how do you know you're doing it right?
Well, the thing that Saint Francis, is do the necessary and do the possible, but do all of it. And then the impossible will work on its own. So we've got to do the necessary. If at the moment you still need to make a living, then make a living. Do what you need to do and do it with love. If you have to sweep floors, honor that because it's facilitating you. And let it facilitate you until something higher facilitates you. So if you have to go to work, don't do it grudgingly, do it willingly. And if you don't like that kind of work and you want to do a different kind of work, then you can train towards that. Ultimately, we have to. I'm very good for saying to people, I'm not your guru, but I know where your guru is. So we've got to find our own guru, because ultimately the only person that really knows where you need to be is the teacher that's within you. You can access him straight away through meditation. I would avoid accessing him through any kind of hallucinogenic or anything external. I would go directly through meditation, just because there are so many distractions there, and they can become addictions, and they can become kind of shortcuts or hacks which I don't think are good on the spiritual path. So I would say to people, go through meditation, go into deep meditation, and access your own inner guru, and just go, I want to work. Where can you and be prepared to hear the answer. I want to work. And then suddenly you'll get instructions. Someone will say, well, do you really want to work? You're 4 stone overweight. Take your clothes off and look in the mirror. You're 4 stone overweight. So do you want a modality? Get your body right first. There are loads of atoms stored in all of that fat that you can convert to make yourself hench. If you're going to want to attract this very rich energy, you need to have a very hench machine to bring it through. Otherwise, it can be destroyed by it, because it is a very powerful, rich energy. So say, okay, get your palate right. This is what Gandhi said. He said, if you master the palate, you master the senses, because they fall into alignment, because the senses are determined by what we eat, what we drink, what we take in with our eyes and with our ears, what we watch on television. So master the palate, bring the senses into alignment. When you master the senses, you master the self. When you master the self, then you become master of the world. So don't ignore this physical body we've got is not separate from the spirit. It's just an outcrop of the spirit. My house is an outcrop of this as well. And this town that I live in is an outcrop, and so is the world. And the universe is an outcrop of the very center nucleus within us. Because within our nucleus is the nucleus of God. The Atman and the Brahman are one at the very center. So we've got to come back to this this idea that you start where you are. Don't worry about the politics. At the moment, they're nothing to do with us. They're just an extension of the world. If we haven't got our own internal politics right, listen, if I can't control my own waistline, I don't need to be concerned about what politicians are doing and what other people are doing. First of all, I need to get myself right. I need to get myself ordered. If I get myself ordered, then the world will start to order itself. There's a lovely story about a vicar that's trying to write a sermon, and his son keeps interrupting him. And he said, I just want to play, Dad. And he just said, I've got to write this sermon. He thinks, I know what I'll do. I'll distract him for an hour while I write my sermon. So he goes to a magazine, and on the magazine, there is a photograph in one of the pages of the globe, of the world. So he takes it out and he cuts it into tiny little pieces and scatters it like a jigsaw. And he says to his son, go and fix that together. Fix that, that jigsaw together. And when you fixed it, we'll play, thinking it will take him an hour. The son comes back in 5 minutes. It's completely formed. And he says, how did you manage to do that in 5 minutes? He says, I just looked at the other side. On the other side, there was a man. So I just put the man together, and then the world looked after itself. So the idea is the people kind of think this is a let 'em off, but the world is a distraction. If we are not ordered ourselves, if we're still struggling with our own addictions, if we're still struggling with the money shape, with the energy of money, if we're still struggling with the energy of labor, if we're still struggling to be kind, if we're still struggling to discipline ourselves to get up in the morning and meditate, if we haven't got full control of this faculty, if we're not congruent in what we think and say and do, if we've still got rebellious elements, we are unable to help the world. So first we have to help ourselves. I need to make of myself a unity. The moment I make myself a unity, when I'm a unity and I'm functioning properly, that will automatically have a resonant effect on the world. Otherwise, I'm like a piston in a car that keeps leaving its position to tell the steering wheel that it's not doing its job. Or it leaves its position to tell the manifold that you're not working hard enough, or it keeps leaving its position because I wanted to be a fancy steering wheel. I wanted to be a wheel hub. It's nothing. If I'm a piston, my job is to be a piston, nothing else. There is a mechanic outside of the car that looks after the rest. So the world is a delicious distraction, and it's very easy to get confused because there are so many problems and so many horrors thrown at us. Every day we can watch 100 murders on the television before breakfast, and it leaves us with no hope. So what we have to do is we have to go, I'm not going to take anybody's word for any of that stuff out there. I'm going to work on myself. If there are elements of me that I'm not kind, I'm going to bring them into order. If there are elements of me that are indolent and lazy, I'm going to bring them into order. If I'm overweight, I'm going to get my weight right. If I've got a drinking habit, I'm going to get my drinking right. If I'm looking for hacks and shortcuts, I'm going to kick that to the curb, because the only hack and the only shortcut is to go into the self and start to work on the things that are right in front of you. I've worked with a guy who said to me, he was a really very beautiful guy, and he said to me, I was working with a very famous Sufi, he said, but he just wasn't giving me modalities. So I've left him, and I'm looking, see if I can work with you. I said, well, you don't really want modalities. He said, don't I? I said, no. I said, you're 5 stone overweight. I said that he's not giving you modalities because you haven't got yourself ready for modalities. If you want modalities, get your body right. You want to be a spiritual aspirant. You want to be an adept. We're talking about Olympic level elite work. People have this idea that it's just wish fulfillment, but it's Olympic level elite work. We should expect no less of ourselves. So I need to make sure my body and my mind and my life is impeccable. That's the work. And that might take me a whole lifetime. So just look at what's around you, start working on that. If you're not being kind to your partner, look at that. If you're having sex with your partner but thinking about other women, have a look at that. If you're watching sexual pornography, have a look at that. You're letting parasites and vampires across the threshold, and they sit on your causal will and they take over your autonomy. If you're eating too much food, look at that. If you're not eating enough food, look at that. Again, I'm giving you generalizations, but the whole idea really is that you go into your own inner guru. It's what the Torah tells us. Your soul will teach you, but we have to go in and we have to start communicating. And when we start to communicate, and mostly, Trey, we communicate by doing the work. The moment I started to get my palate right, the moment I started to question violence, the moment I started to question sexual pornography, which I was addicted to, the moment I started to question alcohol, the moment I started to question my distorted view of sex, because I was abused as a kid, it left me with a strange penchant for, when I say extreme sex, what I mean is that I couldn't look at anybody without imagining, sex, without imagining them sucking me off, or without imagining something like that. Even if it was my friend's girlfriends, that's what pornography does to you. That's what abuse does to you. So I started to look at all that, and rather than let it come up and engage it and identify with it because it was pleasurable, I looked at it and thought, this is a parasite. It's coming into my body. It's taken over. I think it's me. It thinks it's me. And it's creating negative karma in my body and in my life. My wife knew when I wanted sex because I'd seen porn, and she did not like it. And I didn't like her telling me she didn't like it, but she was a great teacher for me. So I was able to get rid of the addiction to pornography and to sex by just looking at hard truths. Food. I got my 5th Dan in karate, master grade, and I'm really proud of myself. And I look in the mirror and I see a fat, overweight, sex addicted, porn addicted, insecure, violent man. I had lots of good qualities. I was kind, but I was a hair trigger. I was so insecure. And that grade made me think, I've got to honor this grade. I cannot walk around in this body and pretend I'm a master of anything. All I could do at the time was have a fight. And even that came from a place of insecurity. So I started to work on the one thing that most people can't do. I got my palate right. I can count on one hand the amount of people I know who can control palate. And palate includes what you eat, what you drink, what you inject, any drugs, anything that you take into your body. It's anything you read, any conversations you have, anything that enters the body through any of the senses is food, and it becomes flesh the moment we take it in. So I started to work on mastering all of those different areas. I wanted to honor this grade. I gave up alcohol. I lost 90%, 95% of my social circle just by giving up alcohol. People were mortally offended when I gave up alcohol. One friend said to me, well, I'm not giving it up. He said, if I can't have a drink, I might as well swing from the nearest oak. I'm not giving it up. And I said, well, I didn't ask you to give it up. I was just having a conversation about what I'm training on. I'm just working on. I'm just taking it out for a ride to see what it feels like. But I recognized as soon as I gave up alcohol why people don't give it up, because most of our social circles are based around not just the acceptance of alcohol, but the expectance of alcohol. You are odd if you don't drink. So I just started to look at all of these individual things, and I gradually recognized that if I'm able to take sexual porn and not do it anymore, when the energy rises in me, I can convert that into my mass. My mass can get stronger and denser, and it become more attractive, and I would attract more teachers, better teachers, a higher grade of teacher. If I can get rid of alcohol, look at all the energy I can get from that. Look at this shame that's rising up in me. I've got this shame rising up in me, and it's torturing me, and it's blackmailing me. After I was abused, I didn't really recognize it consciously, but I self-abused, and I sexually self-abused. And I didn't realize that I was letting the parasite in. It was taking over me. I thought it was me, and it was seeking pleasure through the playground of Geoff Thompson. And it was eating from the buffet of Geoff Thompson, and then it was going away, leaving me after it was sated, and then it would come in for its pudding by going, look at you, you're a deviant, look how filthy you are, look how disgusting you are. If people knew what you were doing in the dark. So then it would attack me again, and I would be racked with shame. So I thought, I can't have this massive energy in me, tormenting me, persecuting me. So I wrote all of it down. I put it into a play, and I put it on a public stage, and I cleaned it by writing it down in a play called Fragile. Everything I was most deeply ashamed of. My wife didn't know this stuff. Nobody in the world knew this stuff, only me and God. Nobody knew it. I didn't really consciously know I was doing it. I just thought it was just a part of my personality. I only knew that I was overrun with lust, and then I was overrun with shame. So I wrote it down, and I cleaned it by writing it down. But man, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Because my wife said to me, why are you so nervous about this play? You're not normally this nervous. I said, well, there's things in there that I've never written about. I'm cleaning them. I've never told anybody about. And she said, for instance, and I showed her the book, and she said, yeah, but you never did that to yourself. And I said, no, but I did. I did. And the voices were saying to me, you go on that, go to put that on the stage, people will see that you're a deviant. Your agent will sack you. Your wife will leave you. Your mum will be deeply ashamed of you. Your agent will, the industry will despise you. The audience will cringe when they look at you. And this felt very, very real. I put the play on, I watched it, and people were coming up to me afterwards crying and hugging me and embracing me. Because all they felt in this play was love, love, love. I took all of this very dark material and I converted it to love, or I brought it into the nucleus and it was converted to love for me. And all of the disturbed relationships I had based around this play just melted away. It just melted away. All I felt for them all was unconditional love. I cleaned it through the play. It was dark, and then it wasn't. It was there, and then it wasn't. Not only was it gone, I was a stronger nucleus. I was more attractive nucleus. I was suddenly attracting the most amazing experiences, the most amazing teachers, the most amazing, and I'm talking about teachers coming in books. You know, the whole of the Zohar delivered to my house, 23 volumes. It's over there. 23 volumes landed on my doorstep as a gift from somebody. Just landed, which became a big part of my esoteric training. So as we contract and get a stronger mass, you attract greater teachers. But the greater teachers are more exacting. Listen, if I'm doing judo in a local judo class, it's okay. If I have a bad day, it's not too bad. If I'm training with Neil Adams, one of the greatest Occidental teachers of his generation, and I'm training in his full-time class with Olympic players, not a commercial class, You can't buy your way in. You're either invited or you're not. If I'm training there, which I did, I bought 5 judo suits and I trained full time with Neil Adams, you cannot have a bad day. You have a bad day, you'll be dropped on your head. So when we're training at a higher level, the standards become higher, the risks become higher, the expectations become higher. To be an elite judo player, you have to be in constant prayer with judo. To be an adept, you have to be in constant prayer. We can't flirt with it, or we shouldn't flirt with it, and we can't. There are no hacks. There are no shortcuts. This is about doing the work, and you'll know if you're doing your work because it is so demanding, because you are in a perpetual stress position between those two forces. Not that it's bad all the time. There are, as it says in the Quran, for every difficulty I will give you one easy. For every difficulty I will give you one easy. The Prophet says it twice. So, but it is, a bit like when I was on the door. You can go on the door and earn 4 times the day rate of a skilled worker. But that's because you're risking your life and you're taking on every malcontent in the city by doing that job. That's what you do. To think otherwise would be to put yourself in great danger. So how much more risky if we're going to take on these darker forces and convert them to light? If we're going to take on this spiritual path? People think it's socks and sandals. It's the most difficult thing I've ever done. Rumi says, he said, birds make great sky circles with their freedom. How do they learn it? They fall, and in falling, they're given wings. Love is not a subtle argument. The door there is devastation. So it's saying this is the path we're called to. This is the path we're all called to. But if we really want to do it properly, we have to do the work. And the work, as Gurdjieff says, is very difficult. And when Gurdjieff says it's very difficult, it's difficult. It's like my friend Rick Young said to me. Rick Young is an elite BJJ player, elite. And he said, I was going to go and do my judo black belt. And he said to me, Geoff, it's very hard. I remember thinking, if he thinks it's hard, it must be really hard, So I would say I'm excited about it all, but there's a big difference between a recreational player and somebody that's devoting their life to it, because it asks everything of you.
Well, to that point, and the caretaker, there's a part where the individual goes and starts to give, right? Starts to give everything he has away, but then he hits a point of exhaustion, of like his fuel tank is zero.
Yeah.
And how do you go about, like, when you start being of service to others, when you start trying to reduce that ego noise and go out into this world and be selfless, there is some, I don't know if it's necessarily sustainable. And for some people, is that because we're still working from the ego, or is that because we're not working on ourselves enough?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. And in the beginning, I did exhaust myself. I burnt myself out because as a naive, as somebody that had woken up and was definitely there, I was a bit naive. I just thought I've got to give it to everybody. And I exhausted myself and I wasted a lot of it. But later I was shown the analogy of a light bulb. An incandescent light bulb loses 90% of its light to heat. 90% is lost. Because it's incandescent, it just throws it everywhere. But if it goes through a chip, 90% of its light is retained. In other words, it's directional. So I went from being an incandescent light bulb, always burning out, always blowing a fuse, to directional service. So I went to an LED bulb. So I'm directional. In other words, I don't serve unless my soul directs me to serve. And my soul comes with all of the instruction. My spirit, comes with all of the instructions, or the prana, whatever you want to call it. It comes with all the instructions there already. It comes with its guard. It comes with its advocate. It comes with its counsel. It comes with its provisions, and it comes with its direction. So it'll say, give this person 5 minutes, Give this person 5 hours. This person needs to be kicked into touch. He's not ready for it yet. This person, you need to walk with this person for the next few years. So it will say, do this book, don't do that book. Do this talk, don't do that talk. And that's all my intuition speaking to me. And if it's not clear, I go into my meditation. I find the liminal space and I just say, I've got this offer, but I'm not sure. Do you want me there? Normally my instinct, my intuition tells me straight away, and I'll just say no. And for me to do that, I had to overcome a negative that I was carrying, which is people pleasing. It was part of the ego. So I had to start practicing saying no when I was called to say no. Because it was saying, if you plant seeds there, they'll be wasted. This person's a vampire. He's not really looking to grow. He's looking to feed. So you learn when to say no and when to kick people into church. So in other words, we don't know and we can't trust ourselves. But the beginning of wisdom is to recognize we can't trust ourselves. We can never trust ourselves because we are in a dualistic world, and the body is by its nature dualistic. Even though we're touching singularity when we meditate and serve and when we do our work, we can't trust ourselves, but we can trust God. So we trust God as he works through us, and he will speak to us through conscience. He'll speak to us through sparks of wisdom, through intuitions, sometimes through visions. Sometimes a book will land and he'll speak to you through that. Sometimes you'll decide not to do something for the wrong reason, for an egoic reason, and you'll get a sign, a very obvious sign in your life that you should do it. So this is what they call the Sword of Discernment. So the Sword of Discernment it's a siddha, it's a gift or a grace, and it enables you to read when a situation is right and when a situation is wrong. It enables you to read deceit. It enables you to read lies. Not that you're judging it, just that you're looking at it and going, this person's not congruent. And then once you get that, people largely, unless they really want to grow, they largely avoid you. Because you can look through them like they're an X-ray, and you can see their lies, and you can see their masks, and you can see that they don't know they've got a mask, and you can see their different personalities, and you can see they're the demons that are hovering around them. So the Sword of Discernment is both inspirational but also quite scary, because none of us want to see a demon working through our wife. We don't want to see a dark energy working through our mother. I don't want to see my best friend is actually not congruent. He hasn't got my best interests at heart. I don't want to see that in people. So it also often means we have to act, which takes a lot of courage, and we have to trust that the spirit will work through us. So sometimes you have to say to people, that's not true. What you're saying is not true. I did so many radio shows when I first brought my book out, and I had the power of discernment. It was there. It was gifted to me. So people would say things and I'd just say, that's not actually true. What you're saying is not true. You can't qualify that. And they would start to blunder, on the radio or whatever, I remember one guy basically calling me a thug. And I said, does your daughter go to a nightclub? And he said, yes, she does. I said, and who do you think looks after her at the nightclub? He goes, well, I don't know. I said, the doorman look after her. That's what they're there for. They're good doormen. They look after her. They're not asking you to thank them, but that's what they do. They're there. They are there to protect your daughter against bad people and against indifferent people who've had a drink. And he just said, oh, I'm so sorry. I just never saw that. I said, they were just people talking from ignorance, So I had the Sword of Discernment very early on, but I developed it as I got cleaner. As I got cleaner and cleaner, I was able to hear the voice of my inner teacher, my intuition, with acoustic clarity. He would speak to me very, very clearly. And if I fell out of alignment, which I did, and sometimes I'd be in a bar and I got a glass of Coke and I'd go to reach it, and my mind has fallen out of alignment. It's gone into a place of lust or a place of flirtation. And before I can touch the glass, it shatters on the bar. It shatters without anybody touching it. And I just say, I hear you. And I bring myself straight back to the center, straight the way back. So Yeah, so it's a great question, because a lot of spiritual people burn themselves out, but if they burn themselves out, it's because they're not listening to their inner tutor. So they're still incandescent. So they're trying to serve everybody, and they haven't got the courage to say, I can't serve you today. Even Christ would say, I can't heal this woman. And the apostles would go, but she's very worthy and she needs it. And he goes, no, she's not in the right place for me to heal her. So I'm saying no. And you would never imagine he would say no. But he says yes when it's right, and he says no when it's wrong. So again, we come into the center and we go to the inner tutor and go, is this where you want me to serve? Is this where you want me to, to spend my time? What is my dharma? Am I a steering wheel, or am I a piston? Am I going to be a singer or a writer, or am I going to be somebody that works in a hospital? It will lead you to exactly what you need to do. And the most powerful things that will happen in your life are mostly very ordinary things that don't seem like much, but you feel drawn to them, like they're magnets. But part of you is going, but I'm busy. I'm in a hurry. I haven't got any money on me. And suddenly you're thinking, I've got to stop and speak to this person. And then once we start to work with that energy, we can bring sanctity to everything. We can bring sanctity, in other words, wholeness to a person. We can bring sanctity to a street, to a city. Ultimately, we can bring sanctity to the world. But we start by sanctifying ourselves. We take the parts of us that are evil, or in privation, or lacking wholeness, a bit like an antibody, corners a virus and goes, yeah, I see you. You're just lacking a few electrolytes. I've got extra. I'll give you them. And it absorbs the virus into itself and makes the virus whole. So it finds something that's unholy or unwhole, and it sanctifies it. And then when we work in that place of sanctification, a high street that might look like a dark forest of stalking tourists suddenly becomes filling rivers of happy shoppers. And everybody that looks like they're going to bomb clean out of your trendy plimsolls suddenly just becomes spirits and angels. So if we don't clean ourselves up, if we haven't got our own filters clean, we're always trying to fix the world at the level of the screen. But we can't fix the world at the level of the screen. We have to come back to the projector, and we have to look at the film running through the projector. Listen, if there's horror impressed on the film, you're always going to see a horror film. And what do we impress on the film every single day? Horror, horror, horror. Violent people, racist people, homophobic people. Also we see all sorts of extreme terror every single day. If you want to, 24 hours down the news, I don't see that. I see love. I see beauty. And that's because my head is in Bibles and philosophy, and I'm writing, or I'm doing a podcast like this every day. This is my whole day, from when I get up in the morning at 4 to when I go to bed at night about 9 o'clock. My whole day is devoted to serving God, to serving love. So
do you say an internal prayer, like when you're walking through, like a chant?
Yeah, I'd normally say the Jesus prayer, or there's some Buddhist prayers that I like. In demonology, they would call this antiretic. So if you've got negative things going around your body, you can talk back. You can do a prayer. This is impermanent. This is unsatisfactory. This is not self. Or you can do the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Mercy means to take, to exchange. Please take this negative energy off me, and please replace it with something beautiful. So we can find our own prayers, our own mantras. And if I go for a walk, which you do in the morning, my whole walk is one constant mantra. And on the way back, I'll do prayers. I bring into my mind all the people I personally know who are suffering. I ask God, give me your peace, leave your peace with me, let your peace project onto all sentient beings who are still suffering. This is from Buddhism. And then I will think about certain people who are struggling at the moment, and I will shower light over them like this. These what Muhammad calls the starry descent, or Al-Ghazali calls the starry descent. So I will see light and kind of coming over them in a healing way. So I've got my own personal practices, but I think the point I'm making is that if we're doing it wrong, it's because we're not listening. But sometimes when we first wake up, we don't listen, because the ego grabs it. The moment you wake up, the ego goes, oh, this is dangerous, but it could be fun. So it grabs hold of it and it takes you into all sorts of directions that might feel spiritual, but perhaps aren't. So we've got to be able to, what Gurdjieff calls self-observation. We've got to self-observe. We've got to observe when it's our voice, the voice of intuition, and when it's the voice of deceit. And we've got to learn to dismiss one. In fact, we've got to make our life, we've got to make our body and our mind so inhospitable that these predators can't exist in us. They would be scorched the moment they came anywhere close. If they touched our divine sword, they would be burnt by it. And it's a very, very powerful force. So we've got to be in that place of impeccability. We've either got to accept that we're going to live recreationally because it's beyond fathom and it's a lot of work, or we've got to go into it and go, why would I expect this to be any less than Olympic elite level? Why would anybody expect this energy that comes through us, Trey, is the most precious energy in the known universe. It's the most valuable energy because it has a creative capacity. It has a massive creative, it's seminal. If you look at Fort Knox, I don't know how many billion pounds worth of gold in there. How many times do you think Fort Knox has been attacked? None. How many times has it been impregnated? None. It's never been broken into. No one's even attempted. You know why? Because they've got 26,000 soldiers encamped around it so that people can't get in. Now, if they're going to spend that much attention just to protect something that is essentially worthless, if we didn't perceive it if we didn't perceive gold as having worth, it would be worthless. It's just metal. So if we didn't perceive it as worth something, it would be worthless. So in other words, it suffers the same as every material thing from entropy. But we've got an energy in us that is naturally negentropic. It's eternal. Jean-Emile Charon would call it an aeon, and the aeon is in every one of our electrons, one of our particles, and our body is filled with trillions of them, and each of those is an aspect, has a phase of God. In other words, it sees all of God, but from a perspective. That's in us. That energy is constantly being plundered by the mores, by what's on the television, by what we're reading in newspapers, by what the latest politician is doing, or by whatever's happening in the politics of the world. It's no good me trying to, it's no good me trying to help, the ecology of the world if I'm still taking in cigarettes, if I'm still filling myself with negative thoughts, because I'm polluting my own planet. One of the big things I got from Buddhism is that they said this is the great earth. And he said it's so difficult, it's so rare to get a body to come into the great earth. It said that even the Buddhas come here to perfect the way. That's how difficult it is. It's like an elite class to perfect the way. Now then you go so they come to the great earth to perfect the way. But then when you go to the Sufis, who are at another level, the Sufis say, this is the great earth. It's all happening here. All of it. We create all of it from here. But if we have a shitstorm going across our filter, we are going to create a shitstorm. But if we're able to, what Gurdjieff talked about, flipping that, so he called that a chief feature. If our chief feature, if the main filter from our mind is negative, we need to go into that and flip it and make it positive. So that everything we do in the world comes from a place of and works in accord with wisdom and love. So again, if we want to start talking about wisdom and love and doing everything from a place of kindness, it sounds easy. Just be kind. But who? Who's going to be kind? There's 20 of you in there. There's 30 of them in here. There's 40 of them, 50 of them. There are every single electron in me has the potential to climb up and take over and have a go at the spaceship Geoff Thompson. I need to have one distinguished self, one central ego, one captain that's going to look at this body and go, yeah, this is my body. I'm going to take charge of it. I'm going to bring it into unity. And when it's in unity, I'm going to sacrifice it to the unity of the cosmos. And I'm going to let that work through me. That is the work. That is it's what Gurdjieff would call the work, but that's our first aim. Don't worry about what's going on out there. Just come back into yourself and live as aligned and as kindly as you can. And if there are any elements in you that present as unkind, observe them and convert them into the center, and they'll become kind. So with an atom, this is the same with us. They say that the nucleus of an atom is only 0.1% of its volume, but it's 99.9% of its mass. 99.9% of its mass. Can you imagine the power within that? And that's because the phase of God is connected to God himself. So this phase of light is connected to the source of light. That's in us. We just have to choose our own central ego, the one part of us that goes, yeah, I'm in this body, but it's all over the place. I'm going to bring it into alignment. This is the story of Odysseus. He goes to the Trojan Wars, and he comes back and he's not even recognized in his own kingdom. Even his wife doesn't recognize him. So he has to come back to his own kingdom and he has to win it back. That's the story of awakening. And it doesn't conclude with him winning his kingdom back. You know how it concludes? He has to go to the neighboring villages, to places where they've never seen an ore, where they've never put salt on their food, and he has to tell them his stories. That's the covenant again. So waking up is great. That's one thing. But we wake up into a body that we have not got sovereignty over. And getting sovereignty over it is about doing a brutal inventory of yourself and going, where am I working in the right place? Where am I working in the wrong place? That's why most of my books are confessional. I write them deliberately to humiliate myself. Because when I humiliate myself, I humble myself and I contract. I don't want people to think I'm Robin Hood because I was a bouncer. I want people to know that I was not Robin Hood. I was more like the Sheriff of Nottingham. I wasn't a good character. I was violent. I was insecure. There are a lot of good things to take from my story, especially now. But for me, it's important to go. I wasn't a good parent. I slept around. I drank too much. I self-abused. I was extremely violent. If I'd have been around at the time of Moses, there would have been a 13th commandment and it would have had my name on it. So it's saying to people, it's humiliating yourself in people, or as Richard Rohr would say, praying for one humiliation every day. Because the humiliation goes, boom, yeah, that's not me. Okay, that's not me. I'm going to convert that into light by no longer engaging it, by no longer identifying with it, by no longer acting on it. It's very powerful. It's very inspiring.
This has been a beautiful conversation. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share that energy, to share your wisdom and your story on this platform. So my friend, my brother, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me. You're giving me the opportunity to move the knowledge. When we move the knowledge, it activates and actuates love. That's what this is now. This is love. Not in the sentimental type, although it covers that. This is the movement of knowledge, the movement of information. If people receive this right and they feel lifted and inspired, it means the spirit has entered them. And that spirit will work away in them. It will inform them. It will reform them, and it can transform them. Because if people have maladies or depressions, it just means that the information in there is not right. It needs to be changed, needs to be altered. When I changed the information in me, so I took my fear pyramid, and that was the wrong information. So I was formed wrongly inside. I got the right information and I re-informed myself or reformed myself. I live how I live now because I reformed. I don't sweep floors in a factory and do menial jobs and cower to authority. I've got one authority, and that's God. That's my only authority, and everything else comes from there. But that's just about informing yourself and reforming yourself. So that knowledge is out there for people, and this, what you're doing with me and you here, is you're allowing me, between us, with you reaching out to me and then me coming back to you, between us, we're creating a space that allows God to speak through us and to work through us. So this energy that we're putting out now will go out and touch whoever it touches, and it will increase in profit. It will become negentropic. It will just like a compound interest. If it just goes to one person and that person passes it on, how far can it go? It just keeps expanding. So this is what we're doing here, is the actuation of love. So Jean-Emile Chiron, Jean-Emile Chiron believed that the universe evolves through reflection, through knowledge, through action, through love. That's what this is. We're reflecting. I'm reflecting on my experiences. You're reflecting on your experiences. And we're sharing the knowledge. And that's the action. This is action. And when we bring those three things together for the right purpose, not because I want to, more people to follow me, or because I want to earn money. I'm not interested in anything like that. We're doing it because that's my covenant. I grow when I pass the information on, and you grow when you pass the information on, and we grow together when we create a space that enables us to do that.